To some international news, Israeli forces have shot dead Al Jazeera's journalist Shireen Abu Akleh in the occupied West Bank. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, Shireen was hit by a live bullet on Wednesday while covering Israeli raids in the city.
Journalism is undoubtedly one of the most dangerous jobs on earth. A few months ago, an organization called Freedom House released a survey on the state of the world's press freedom. And its startling conclusion is that it is now worse than it has been in 13 years. Last year alone, 79 journalists were murdered on the job. That was not the record. We had that mark back in 2007, when 120 journalists died because of their work. But it is broadly in line with historical trends in which about 100 journalists are killed each year, simply for doing their job. What about those under arrest? Well, 2017 was on the record high, with more than 250 journalists in jail globally, with the COVID-19 outbreak seeming to set the pace for this retrogressive act and transforming the dynamics against journalists globally. COVID-19 has had a profound effect on press freedom. The pandemic has resulted into mass censorship and a crackdown of journalists in many countries.
How can true journalism be perpetuated even in this era of COVID-19? Yeah. How can now that we've been facing quite a lot of challenges, and so how can that true journalism be perpetuated? How can it be lengthened in as much as these harsh times of COVID-19, which has come with its fair share of our troubles?
I think it, at least in terms of our approach at Africa Uncensored, has always been not to be the fastest one out with content. In a high pressure situation like this, where there's a lot of there's a huge lack of information, at least even at the beginning of the pandemic, as you remember, there was a very, very big gap in terms of what people knew about the pandemic, what newsrooms would tend to do, and that's because they've been created to do that, is really rush to the news cycle and try and produce as much as possible.
At least 387 people working in the media industry around the world had been imprisoned by December 1st of the year 2020. As per Reporters Without Borders, 5 countries were responsible for over half of all convictions. China led the pack with 117 jailed journalists, followed by Saudi Arabia with 34, Egypt 30, Vietnam 28, and Syria 27. While the majority of imprisoned press workers were still men, the number of women arrested in 2020 increased by a third to 42. The report also highlighted the detention of the Australian WikiLeaks founder, Julian Assange, currently in Belmarsh Highly Security Prison in the UK. Reporters Without Borders claimed that the conditions had become much worse following a coronavirus outbreak in the prison, and that Assange had been placed in de facto isolation. In this regard, what happened was, in the wars that passed, they were generally out of tangible goods such as land, water, and ethnicity, and in those kinds of conflicts, journalists were considered as observers to the conflict rather than participants in it. Therefore, in war zones, journalists were targets. But George W. Bush, the 43rd American president, changed the dynamics when he stood up in the Congress after the 9/11 attacks and said that you're either with us or with the enemy. With this single statement, what George Bush did was that he made the conflict a binary choice. For journalists, that was incredibly challenging because it meant that if you are doing a job and reporting in line with the professional standards of balance, accuracy, and fairness, then by definition you had to go and report from the other spectrum of the conflict to get information. This meant that you become part of the enemy in the eyes of the government. This is not an abstract idea, but an idea that has had serious consequences to journalists globally.